Hello and good evening and welcome to the Questionable Album Club. My name is Seb Hunter and joining us on the panel tonight we've got Marcus Kingwell. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. We've got Ross English. Hi Ross.
Good evening everybody.
We've got Simon Ward.
Hello there.
And we've got Steve Hackett. Hello Steve. You joined us. We're just having a little pre-recording argument about Voice of the Beehive, funnily enough. So it's already kicking off. Steve, it was your choice this week. Well, from last week, you chose the Happy Mondays final album. Well, there wasn't their final album, was there? Because they reformed and did another one, but it was their fourth album. The album that famously bankrupted Factory Records. Yes, please. Would you like to explain your justification for choosing it?
Yeah, I mean, it got slated at the time. A little bit unfairly, I think, really, given that the first two albums, in my humble opinion, were brilliant. I've got a bit of history with the band as well. I mean, I went to the really early gigs. I had a friend in Manchester who were, I remember phoning me up in about '87 and saying, "Oh, you should check these bands out. They're mates of ours, and they're just playing at these little clubs in Manchester, and there's something happening." They were the Mondays and the Stone Roses, So I went to see them both at early gigs in London. So we're talking late '87, early '88, when it was basically just me and a bunch of Mancs, and which was interesting. And you went to these gigs and you think, well, this is something else. And you could see that the Stone Roses were, you could see with them there was some sort of lineage. That obviously was some sort of extrapolation of the mid '80s jangle thing and the Birds and whatever. You could see where they were coming from. But I remember the first time I saw the Mondays, and I think it was, I can't even remember. Dingwalls. It was Dingwalls. I remember thinking, what the fuck? I mean, where's that come from? What type of music's this? I didn't get it. You couldn't. Yeah, maybe been listening to Can or something, or Sly Stone or something, but it seemed new to me. It seemed very, very different, and I thought it was absolutely intriguing. And they didn't take off for a while, but whereas the Roses sort of went stratospheric, and then the whole thing went a bit nuts. So I used to follow them around. I went to Paris to see the Stone Roses in early '88. That was something else. And I actually did go to Reykjavik with the Happy Mondays. Flew with them. It was part of this nightclub we're involved in the West End, and so we flew with them. They did a gig at Reykjavik University. Spent a couple of days with them. Came back with them, which was. That was quite a weekend. But it's a family podcast, isn't it? So I can't really go into the details of that. So I love them from the off. I love the albums, and this thing came out, and there's a lot of stories behind it. Obviously with the drugs and everything. And it's essentially, it was the Tom Tom Club, wasn't it? It was Chris France and Tina Weymouth. They were brought in to produce this thing, and the story goes that they'd sent them there to sort of get them away from the temptations of the UK, but obviously that doesn't work in certain Caribbean islands. I probably don't think that's true. I think basically what they tried to do is get a bit of that sort of the Compass Point sort of stuff that they used to do in the '80s, that the brilliant stuff that came out of there. Tom Tom Club were one of them, but Talking Heads, Grace Jones, that sort of thing. And I think that was the deal. And Chris France and Tina Weymouth, unfortunately, didn't have Sly and Robbie and all these brilliant session musicians. Had just had a bunch of Mancunian junkies, basically, in it. What could possibly go wrong? And
I think apparently there were loads of arguments about which studio to choose. One of them wanted to call it Manchester, or they were Amsterdam, and they went around lots of places. And in the end, I think the record company thought that because Shaun Ryder was a junkie, he was a heroin addict at the time, and I think the Barbados was supposed to be, there was no heroin in Barbados. I think that was the idea, but there was unfortunately a lot of crack cocaine.
Yeah, I mean, they say, oh, it was, ruined by. Yeah, I mean the first two albums they were on fucking drugs, for whatever, and they were genius. So I'm not quite sure about that.
Steve, I'm going to interrupt you. I'm going to interrupt you because you've gone off on a bit of digression about being on a plane with Happy Mondays to Iceland and stuff. I actually only asked you why you chose the album. We've gone down the rabbit hole here, so I'm just going to pause you for a minute. We want to hear all this stuff. We want to hear all this, but I'm just going to go around the room and then we'll come back to you.
Yeah, no
problem. Marcus, when I hear the word Madchester, I always think of you.
Well, that's very kind, sir. But I'll try and take it with kindness, even though it's probably a bit of a dig and the usual thing. Actually, I do like some of the Manchester music. I thought the Stone Roses were amazing, and I still absolutely adore them. I think they made some fabulous music. And it was off the back of that I kind of got introduced to the Happy Mondays in about 1988. There was, when I was at university in Bristol, there was this wheeze you could do to load up a band's gear and then get in to see the gig for free, and then you got on the guest list for the next one. So I signed up for this, and so I was effectively a Happy Mondays roadie for one evening, pushing all the flight cases onto the stage and then calling the cables at the end of the night. So that was like a bit of fun. So then thinking, right, what's this band all about? Hadn't heard a note of their music. So stood in the auditorium, this little venue at our student union, and watched it and thought, what a load of crap. I was completely underwhelmed. I thought, this is utter fakes, haven't got a clue. What's that guy doing with the maracas? How did that singer ever get in the band? The rest of them look like a total shambles. We've got this weak white boy funk stuff coming out. I thought, this is Emperor's New Clothes, like full on. And I sat through it all, trying to make head or tail of it, trying to get into it, and just got like, this is doing absolutely nothing for me. And I was also completely baffled. This is when Acid House was kind of getting big, that there was a crossover in the fan base. And I'm thinking, I mean, not that I particularly liked it. Well, I didn't like Acid House, that's the truth of it. But I couldn't see even the connection. So I'm going, why are these people with their smiley T-shirts and their bandanas and all this not in their ecstasy watching this group do this rubbish? And I was, sort of baffled by the whole thing. I thought, this is not for me. And for years, I didn't like them. And I'm going to leave it there.
Fucking hell. What? We're so sorry we've had travelling with Happy Mondays on a plane. We've asked two people. Steve, you've been on a plane with them to Reykjavik. Marcus, you roadied for them. This is bizarre. It's like last week, it was suddenly turned into Goth Week. This week, it's like, I worked with a Happy Monday. Right, so Simon.
I played bass in the Happy Mondays for a couple of years, so
that explains it.
Yeah. I'm fascinated by the Happy Mondays. I have a slightly unusual relationship for me with them as a band. They're kind of, on the one hand, I really like some of their songs, like really, really like some of their songs, but I've never been a fan of the Happy Mondays particularly. I had a copy of Bummed, and I think wrote for Lucky's glorious, Mad Cyril is glorious. Using the quote, you're rendering that scaffolding dangerous is glorious at the beginning. I didn't get into 24-Hour Party People until much later, the first album, but I think 24-Hour Party People is a magnificent single. So, and so are the two at the beginning, Tart Tart and Cuff Down, whatever it's called. I suspect we've probably all heard Pills and Thrills and Bellyaches more often than we need to. And I don't dislike it. I like bits of all of their albums, but that isn't a particularly standout album in my opinion. And Step On, if I never hear it again, it'll be too soon. But this record, I am with. So
no one's actually been asked to offer an opinion yet, Simon. We've got into this thing now where everyone's just cagey for the first fucking half an hour of this podcast. So I'm
going to tell you what I think of the record, because I normally do the opposite. So why not? This album, I get that it was critically not brilliantly received. There's a lot of myths about this record. something I'll talk about later on. I discovered because I am I've got a lot of time on my hands at the moment. I've done quite extensive. I've been listening to the Happy Mondays relentlessly for 2 weeks, and I've also discovered that there is a 52, count them, episode kind of podcast. The first 24 or 5 of which are Ange, Paul Ryder's ex-wife, and Paul Ryder basically talking through his entire life, including the whole of the Happy Mondays. And I've learned, because I was never really a fan of the Happy Mondays, didn't really know anything about them. And that's they're 45-minute episodes. It's fucking in depth. And I'm sure it's not the done thing to recommend a different pod on this pod, but I would if you're interested in rock and roll mythology, if you're interested in what it's like to try and operate a day-to-day working life as a junkie, if you're interested in Happy Mondays trivia, Manchester trivia, it's just wonderful. And he's so honest and open, Paul Ryder, in this thing.
Does he mention me in the podcast?
Sorry?
Does he mention me in the podcast?
Yeah, it's mostly about you, Steve. There's one episode in the middle where he doesn't talk about you. But other than that, yes, it is mostly about you. It should be called, and it doesn't matter. Anyway, what I discovered from watching that is that lots of things that I didn't know about the Mondays, like, for example, Paul Ryder was the musical powerhouse, that it was really his band. It wasn't Sean Ryder's band, it was Paul Ryder's band, and Sean joined and then did all the fronting of it. But throughout, it was Paul that made all the decisions, drove all the business, made everything happen, was the musical director, was the guy that they all looked to for what do we do next. And most of the songs were, throughout their career, were bass driven. The bass line came first and the rest of it came later. And actually, if you go back and listen to their records, that makes perfect fucking sense, right? You can hear that they're bass-based songs. But they talk about a couple of the myths about this record. First of all, it wasn't a disaster. It peaked at 14 in the charts. It didn't sell like Factory wanted it to. Second myth about this is that it crashed Factory Records. As far as I can see, it absolutely didn't. Factory Records collapsed Factory Records because Tony Wilson was an absolute wonderful man, artistic genius, useless businessman. And this was around the time when HMRC turned up at Factory and asked to see the manager, and the manager wasn't there. So the guy told the bar lady that he wanted to see the books, and she said, "Do you want to see the ones we keep out the back or the ones we keep under here?" And that was the beginning of it going horribly wrong. I think it's absolute bollocks that this album didn't cost that much money. It was only 350,000 to make it. They wanted them to make it for 100 and something thousand. And another myth about it, I think, is that it's a bad record recorded by junkies who couldn't do anything. The only junkie who couldn't do anything, as far as I can tell, during the recording was Sean Ryder, because he was coked up. And as Tony Wilson brilliantly points out in this documentary, cocaine is a very unfortunate drug for creative people because they're all drawn to it, and it's the one drug that stops you from creating anything. Nobody can write on cocaine. Tony Wilson, this is a little aside, but I thought it was quite interesting. He said he met another record company owner early on, and they were talking about drugs and the problems that you have with bands on drugs. And the guy said to him, "Don't worry about heroin. I know it's not socially acceptable, but I've got artists who've been on heroin for 30 years and have been giving me a Grammy-nominated album every year. That's not your problem. Your problem is the cocaine album." And then he said every record owner has had a cocaine album, and you find out subsequently it wasn't. Yes, please. But so it's, from what I can tell, from what I've read, the rest of them really enjoyed it. So Paul Ryder and Gaz Whelan, the drummer, think that Yes Please is their favourite Mondays record.
That's interesting.
And I can see why, because the first 5 songs of what would have been the A side of the LP, in my opinion, is the best sequence of consecutive brilliant songs that across the Mondays' entire catalogue. So Stinking Thinking in particular, Sunshine and Love and Angel I think are probably their three best songs. And then the other two in between, I hadn't knowingly ever listened to this record before I started researching this. Although I discovered we used to have an MP3 drive in an office that I worked in where we played music all day on random, and we would all bring our CDs and rip them. So there was lots of music on there that I didn't know what it was. And I think we must have had that on there because I knew a lot of the songs on this album really well. But I never actually sat down and listened to it. The second side, the last 5 tracks, I think are not as exciting. But I think those first 5 are by far and away the best thing that they put together as one block of stuff. And I love the sound of it. I love what I've discovered by playing lots of Happy Mondays back to back is that actually their songs didn't really change that much. Paul Ryder wrote better bass lines as it went on, but each one of them is produced by somebody with a very strong production ethos. So Martin Hannett's one sounds like a Martin Hannett record. Paul Oakenfold's one sounds like a Paul Oakenfold record. And the last one sounds like the sort of rhythm section of the Talking Heads one. You know, it's got that.
And you know, like, John Cale produced the first one.
Yeah, and I left him out because I don't really know what a John Cale produced album would sound like. So I don't think I've heard of the others. But yeah, and it's got a sound. I mean, I love the sound of the first record, and I mean,
I think you're right, and I think as well. I think you make a point about this bass and drums thing. A lot of those bands, the Roses included, Smiths as well. You know, Northern bands whose rhythm section played a lot in the clubs there.
Yeah,
you know, look into it. They played into soul and funk clubs, doing covers and everything. So they were tight as hell. You know, exactly the same with the Roses, exactly the same with the Smiths. So they had that bass, you know, right at the start of it, which.
Yeah,
Ross.
So yes, I enjoyed. I've enjoyed this couple of weeks.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you very much. That was very good. Ross.
Yeah, I feel like the child with his nose against the window, looking in at everyone who's got a history with the Happy Mondays. I mean, you know, late 80s, that whole Madchester thing was just sort of part of the furniture, and it was there, and I didn't pay much attention to it until probably early 90s, like 92, 93, when I fell in love with the Stone Roses' first LP, and so that then went back and had a look. Became a big Charlatans fan as well at the time, and still am. Happy Mondays, I thought they had some decent tunes, but they were never a band I found I could take to my heart. They were sort of, you know, there, and I liked some stuff, but I was more interested elsewhere. I mean, I was interested enough. I bought the first Black Grape LP, so you know, I wasn't completely aloof from, you know, the charms of what came after. And I saw them play live once at Glastonbury in 2000, and it was terrible. I mean, they were all over the place. Sean Ryder particularly, and then halfway through, Sean Ryder started berating the crowd for not getting into it. And you know, when a singer starts blaming the bad gig on the audience, it's not going to go. It's not going to get any better from that point. So you know. I'm sort of, you know, I'm not massively familiar, but I'm open to, and you know, and that. I thought this album was just dull. I was really bored. I had the same reaction to most of the songs, not all of them, but most of them, which was they'd start, and I'd think, well, that's quite a nice groove, and then the vocal would kick in, and there was a line that was sort of like almost like a hook, and I thought, okay. And then 5 minutes later, it would still be doing exactly the same thing, and I would be really, 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 really bored. And it's not for every song, because some songs didn't take my interest at all within that first minute, and just left me cold. I thought the voice was reedy in places, and well, we know, you know, that's the effect of crack cocaine on the vocal cords. I mean, we know that. And I thought you could hit some of the places the voice was not really good. It sounded to me like an album that was delivered with a note saying, "Will this do?" on it. You know, I imagine the record executives were pleased to have got something. I just can't imagine anyone picked that up in the record label and, you know, went, you know, boys, you've done it again. I mean, I just felt it sounded like a band that was disinterested. I think the link between that and Acid House is quite interesting, and the sort of like the things that go about it, because you know, I'm not an Acid House fan. I wasn't at the time, but it was around enough that you couldn't miss a lot of the stuff. And in Acid House particularly, there were there were some bands which were really inventive, and you could hear, even though it wasn't my thing, you could hear they were really inventive. And there were some bands that seemed to be putting out a beat and a hook and just, repeat ad nauseum. And you can do that because, the audience you're selling this to are people who are chemically enhanced, who would find that repetition, really hypnotic. And I think when you're playing in that sort of area, and I put the Happy Mondays in that area where there is this sort of repetition going on, you've got to do it really well. Because otherwise, if you listen to it without the advantages of chemicals, it does get really boring really quickly. And that's what I found. I thought there were high points. I thought the first track was probably the strongest on the LP, and I did get a bit bored by the end of it, but it maintained my interest. I quite like Theme from Netto because it was different. But to be honest, by the time we got to that point on the album, I was just really willing the whole thing to be over. And
Ross, can I interrupt?
Yeah.
Last time you were on, we were doing Van Halen 3, and you astonished us all by the depth of your preparation. You'd listened to 4 different Van Halen albums from different points in their career, and you were sort of, so did you do the same? I'm interested to hear whether you did the same with this.
I listened to Thrills and Pills, and this a lot, back to back, because I wanted to hear the progression. I didn't go back to the earlier ones.
Okay, because as Simon says, it really is. They all sound so different. Well, apart from the last 2, apart from, I think, Pills and Thrills and this one have got high definition bass. They are all about the bass. It's that kind of.
I think that the last one sounds like a combination of the first 2.
It's interesting because you read some of the positive reviews of Yes Please, and it's all about, this is a turn to the dark side. This is a real dark turn, and you can see that lyrically it's quite nihilistic, and actually it hasn't got the airy sound of Thrills and Pills. If you took one of these tracks and stuck it in that previous album, I don't think you'd say, "Oh, that's a bit different." You'd say that's a bit of a filler. Because, Sean Ryder's lyrics are never, sunshine, rainbows and lollipops. I don't see it being hugely different from that, But,
I think it's one of those things where the circumstances of its construction add a sort of doomed nihilistic narrative to what's actually,
But one thing I would say, Ross, you talked about the effects of crack cocaine on his voice. They didn't actually record any vocals when they were in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
So
but I imagine the effect was.
Well, he was clean. By the time they recorded the vocals, he'd been to rehab. It was about 8 weeks later.
Yeah, he's not a singer. He's not a singer. He's not.
When his
just
voice,
a bloke with a microphone.
Sorry, I butted in. Carry on.
No. I was just saying he's not a singer in the traditional sense, is he? I mean, he's a frontman, but he's basically he's just an everyman, a surrealist everyman with a microphone, and that's half of it, right?
But I still think the voices sounded particularly reedy compared to what was before. I mean, it might be just the effects of years of abuse.
I think it's mixed too high, isn't it? It's mixed too high. It's given too much prominence. I mean, there's a lot of it sounds like a Tom Tom Club record with him doing his vocals, so you can hear everything he's saying, which is not necessarily a good thing.
Hold on a minute, Steve. Let's get Seb's. Seb, have you got any opinions on this one?
Yeah, but I'm just sorry. I'm just enjoying the conversation. I'll just give my quick context. I came out of sort of my metal fever dream at a time when the Roses, the Madchester thing was in its ascendancy. And I don't know if you remember at the time, metal was kind of desperately trying to kind of make itself contemporary by being a bit funky and a bit this and a bit this. And I remember beats were kind of getting. I remember the band I played in London, Cat Blue, we were trying to get a bit. We were sort of on our material. We'd say it was a bit, Stone Roses meets the Guns N' Roses or the other way around or something. And it was like we were trying to be. We knew this kind of stuff was kind of happening and coming through and stuff. And so that was my initial kind of contact with it. And then of course. The ubiquity of Pills and Thrills and the kind of the perfection of those singles, and then I guess I never did the whole. When I came out of that kind of the metal genre, I kind of in '92 I kind of went into like lo-fi American stuff like Pavement and Sebadoh, and then sort of shoegazy stuff, My Burn Valentine Ride, that sort of thing. I suppose the Madchester vibe, the Spirals, all that sort of stuff was sort of on its way out at that time. So it was kind of the end of the scene, and when the second Rose album eventually came out, it was what, it's 94, 95 or something, and that was just completely different. So I suppose I only knew the sort of super hi-fi Pills and Thrills, which I liked at the time. It was like kind of like Screamadelic. It was this perfect production, sounded great. It did all the, I still like all those singles. And so I did exactly the same as Simon, because I liked them. I knew I kind of liked the vibe of it. The kind of it always wanted to be a bit of Can. They have a vibe, and it just kind of just goes on, and you're either on the vibe or not on the vibe. And I love Shaun Ryder's kind of anti frontman vibe. I always love that sort of thing. A bit like Marky Smith, that Manx sort of like just a bloke off the street with a vision of, even if it's a vision of nothing, there is a lot of nihilism in this. And I went back and I listened to, I remember having listened to Bummed back in the day and just hating it. And I hated it even more this time, just because it's just that they would say, because Martin Hammett produced, didn't he? And it was like, apparently it's just this clash of narcotics. They're all on different drugs. It just sounds echoey and awful. It just didn't get it at all. But I loved the first album. I really, really liked it. It just sounded like a kind of like a post-punk album, I really liked it. Just didn't know it at all. So that was a nice surprise. So I've spent a lot of time, like you, Simon, listening to Happy Mondays, and I've really probably enjoyed this more than any other one we've done, just because of the breadth of it, and the vibe, and putting it on, and just, I know they get a weird hook in you, don't they? The Mondays, this kind of, and I completely, Simon, what you said about the first 5 or 6 songs, I completely agree. I think Sunshine Love is a masterpiece. I think Angel is a masterpiece as well. They've got a lot of percussion happening in stereo, and it just works so well with that bass line in it. And
you can tell it was produced by a rhythm section, can't you?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. It's a rhythm section album through and through and through. I mean, the guitar's okay, but the guitar's a bit half-assed. He's always a bit half-assed.
And that's the right choice for Happy Mondays, because they were a rhythm section band. They were never about the rest of it.
Exactly the same as Can. Exactly the same as Can.
Right.
Yeah.
So I
mean, the Mondays sound dialed down in this. It's quite interesting. I wonder how much of it, was Chris Frantz and Tina Weymouth. I don't know. To me, it sounds, it's got that sort of Tom Tom Club thing, musically. I don't think there's a bad musical track on it. I just think Sean ruins it for half of the album, really. I think.
Why? In what way does he ruin it?
I just think that, like I was saying earlier, I think his vocals are mixed too clearly. That I loved it. I love Bummed. I love the mess that was Bummed, and it just sounded, what he was saying sounded, and it's all, the same druggy gibberish, but it just sounded, it had an edge there. When you can hear what he's saying, I don't think it works so well. Like Stinking Thinking, I disagree. I think he ruins that. It's such a great musical track, and he completely fucking ruins it the minute he comes into it.
Come on, this is the world's most famous baggy junkie doing an anti-drug song.
Yeah.
What's not to like?
Is that what it is?
Yeah. Stinking Thinking was something that his therapist said to him.
By the way,
that thinking is stinking thinking.
Yeah, I'll just, that song theme from Netto. Do you know what Netto is?
Nothing, apparently. It's a Manchester word for nothing.
It's not. It's I remember at the time thinking, what is it? And it's one of these crappy little corner shops. It was like a small chain in the north, in the 80s, like a 7-Eleven, So it's basically just him singing, that over the top of this sort of languid 70s funk thing. I think it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. One of the best songs on the album. But,
Marcus, are you going to tell us what you think now?
Yeah, I loved it. It absolutely got me, and it was a real surprise because of all my negativity and prejudices from 30 years ago, and it got me from the first track. I've played it probably more times than I've played any other record on the Questionable Album Club, and I've enjoyed it without looking at the track listing, without looking at Wikipedia, without listening to other records of theirs. I've listened to it as a sort of, oh God, this is going to sound really pretentious, but just as music coming out and going through the room. I'm not thinking about, oh, that's a bass guitar part, or, that kind of analytical thing, which is probably what I do when I don't really like the music very much. I'm thinking back to I think it was the Yes album, or one of those where I could tell it was I could picture a plasticky keyboard, and you start imagining the instruments and all that stuff. It wasn't like that for me. It was just beautiful sound coming across, and I wasn't trying to think, is there a bridge or a middle eight or deconstruct it, or just like, it's just lovely stuff washing across the room. And it had that, and we've talked about the sound, the hi-fi-ness of it and the sound quality. It's one of those albums I would call is in Technicolor for the audio. It's so rich, and there's stuff going on all over the place. So I just find that completely joyous. Some of the stuff we've listened to, I think of as black and white albums where the sound is thin and it's kind of level and there's nothing going on. This was the opposite. It's kind of alive and jumps out of, you could play it on the radio in your bathroom on AM and it would still be kind of sparkling. I don't know, that's, I guess, the genius of production and great musicians, really. And I don't mind Sean Ryder's voice in it. You know, he's a non-singer. Well, I've got two opinions of him. He's an idiot and he does a great interview. So, you know, if he's on being interviewed, I'll watch him every time, but it doesn't stop him being an idiot. But I'm comfortable with his voice. It's a bit like what's his name from the Stone Roses? He can't sing either, but I like the overall effect that's coming out with the Roses. And on this one, likewise, I don't mind whether I didn't even think whether his voice is high or low in the mix. It was just there and it was fine. You know, it's sort of what I expected. I don't really think the songs would have been any better with a proper singer. You know,
well, Marcus, it's funny because I think there's a lot more Rowetta, the backing singer, in this because he was so unable to contribute.
That's a very good point, actually.
And that works really well.
That's a really good point. Yeah. So I suppose the vocal melodies are carried by her much more, but it's more like his voice as a thing, a sonic whatever you want to call it, just seems to work. And it's not even doesn't offend me. I think I sort of quite like it. It's there, it's good for the music. And I wouldn't have wanted, I don't feel like, oh, it's really good, a really good funky soundtrack. If only they had a better singer. That didn't cross my mind at all. And when the album finished, I was like, wow, that went out. That was almost too quick. And it's very rare I've said that on the Question Album Club. They've nearly all dragged on. Maybe it is a shorter album. I didn't even look at my watch when it's playing. It's just been a lovely wash of sound for whatever it is, 45 minutes or an hour. I don't really know.
Marcus, if you left it on, did you get to the hidden track at the end of Cowboy Dave? Is
that the jokey stuff? They're calling the
White
House and stuff.
Yeah.
It's not funny. Sean Ryder phones. He phones the Pope. Well, he phones the Pope's office.
Yeah.
And then he phones the Prime Minister, and then he phones the President of the USA. Then he phones, who's the last one? He phones the Queen.
Yeah.
I've worked in government. I've worked in government. Having idiots ring up is just like, oh, good God. Yeah.
I know. I thought, what a dick. You know, not interested, not funny. I will filter that out mentally because it's just stupid. And when I know the science is coming up, I can press the button to make it go to the next track because that's just, you just should know better, really. I'm not really sure I'd be interested if anybody found that funny. I just thought it was really, really childish and of sort of no consequence. But what else is there to say about Happy this record, really? Actually, what it has done is when Spotify rolled on, it did play some of their old tracks, which made me enjoy them much more than I probably did back in the 90s. I thought, oh yeah, actually, I get it. I sort of get it a bit better now. It's not going to make me go back into everything else, but just as this particular album, I think is a winner.
Yeah, interesting.
I'm really surprised. I mean, I've not been in this position before, where I'm so out of step with people whose musical views I respect.
Welcome to my world, Ross.
Yeah. I mean, you didn't need to look for the bridge or the middle eight; they weren't there. It sounded really. I know that the caveat is there are a lot of bands out there who do write the music before the lyrics come in, and write those songs sometimes not even with the singer in the room. I think there are lots of bands who do that, but normally then the singer comes in and actually their vocal then informs the song, and the song has to develop in relation to that, and therefore it becomes a piece that was greater than the sum of its parts. And I think you can just tell that this isn't happening, that the vocal is completely separate because the songs don't develop along with that vocal.
What's interesting about that, Ross, is because I've now watched somewhere in the region of 36 hours of footage of somebody talking about this. Paul Ryder was saying that for the previous records, Sean would be in the room with them when they were writing the music. He wouldn't be getting involved in the music. but he'd be in the room with them as they were doing it and would be getting ideas and writing them down and trying things out as they were writing the songs. But for this one, he didn't even bother coming into the room because relations were a little bit strained already between Paul and Sean.
And that's exactly the point with this album. It's exactly the point with this album. He sounds separate, like you say. He was recording,
and the reason that they got taken, the guy that brought them home from Barbados was their first manager, who was then now working at factory as like a operations manager.
Nathan.
And he got a phone. No, not Nathan. Paul, somebody or other, who was the guy before him, the manager before him. And he rang them up to see how it was going, and they said, "Oh yeah, Sean's coming in to do some vocals. We're just setting up a table and chairs for him." And he said, "I went away and I was thinking, what's wrong with this conversation? There's something wrong with this conversation." Then he was like, "Fucking hell, Sean can't stand up." So then he rang them back and said, "I want you all home tomorrow. This isn't going to work." So yeah, like what you're hearing is exactly what was wrong. If there is anything wrong with this record, is that Sean and the band were completely detached for the first time.
It could have been so great, and it is good. It's a good record, and I've really enjoyed going back to it. I enjoy it a lot more than I did when I heard it the first time. But you just think if they'd have caught him a year earlier, maybe even a year later, it could have been amazing.
And apparently when he was sober and after he'd been in rehab and so whatever, he heard the songs and was like, I don't really like the songs. I wish I'd been more involved and changed the course of some of these tunes, you know what I mean? Right. Which again is yet more negativity. But I'll tell you what though, what I really enjoyed, having wandered around like much, or a lot of us seem to have done these last few weeks, listening to a lot of this, today, just because I thought, I wasn't really picking up on the lyrics, and I just thought a lot of it sounds just half-assed and thrown away. So I listened to it. Well, you know, on Spotify you can have the lyrics are on the bottom, right? And they're just amazing. They're fantastic. Even though they're half-assed, he had writer's block, and they were trying to get him to do it. They had to give him a rhyme. They locked him in a room with a rhyming dictionary. All the things you do, right? But they're just brilliant. They're just fantastic, especially on that song "Dustman." You know.
Dustman is wonderful.
When he's got Rowetta singing in a kind of classic gospel way, she's singing like, and when you hear it, you think, oh, it's just the chorus, right? But she's singing, slimy, bug-eyed mungworm at the bottom of the puddle, lay on its back, talking twaddle. It's just the bottom of the puddle. You're that bug. It's just amazing, and it's this kind of soul song. It's just, it's genius. And I think that's where all this stuff about the nihilism comes from, because the lyrics they are bleak. They are very, very bleak, and they're very personal. They're kind of full of self-hatred and failure and all this sort of stuff. And I suppose, and you get a different spin on the album when you're aware of the lyrics, because the lyrics are very, very.
It was dark, wasn't it? He was in a bad place.
Yeah, but they're very literate. They're not the lyrics of a coke-addled "I don't give a fuck." They're very perspicacious. They're saying something very specific. Do you know what I mean? That it's a bright mind that's created this. No matter whatever the context, it's an intelligent mind that's come up with this stuff. No matter how surrealistic and nonsensical, it's, you know.
I think artistically they're massively underrated, the Happy Mondays. So like, I've got lots of very conflicting ideas about the Happy Mondays. So we talked last week about metalers and goths being able to unite based on the people that used to beat them up on a Saturday night. Well, the Happy Mondays were the people who used to beat us up on a Saturday night. But at the same time, they were talking about music in the same way that, I mean, I'm in dodgy ground here, but I think we're probably all quite middle class. And they were talking, there was a bunch of fucking football hooligans who would beat you up on a Saturday night talking about music in the same way that we did. And when you listen to Paul Ryder talk about music, he loves it in the same way that all the sort of airy-fairy types did as well. It's a unification thing. Like, everybody's the same, really, that's involved in this music. And yeah, man. And I also think that the Mondays, on the one hand, the Mondays were I've seen it written a lot of times that they were the Sex Pistols of their generation. And I think they were, because they were genuinely chaotic and they genuinely frightened people, including the music press. Because a friend of mine used to do press, and he worked with Delicious, which was a band formed by Gaz Whelan from the Mondays and the guitarist from King of the Slums and Andy Rourke from the Smiths and a couple of other people. And this is a few years later, in the mid-90s. And they were a fucking disgrace. Everywhere they went, they stole from everybody. I should probably be careful what I say actually, but like they were like they borrowed money that they never paid back. They turned up so wasted they couldn't play. They were aggro, you know, they were swaggering around the place. And I think the Mondays were people were scared of them. Like the society was afraid of these people, right? But at the same time, they were responsible for Madchester and indie dance, which are two genres of music that were completely unnecessary.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting when you say Madchester, because I just want to talk about that for 1 second before we finish. This phenomenon thing, you know, this, you know, like when it got labelled Madchester, didn't it? And there you go. And it gets compartmentalised a little bit like Britpop and all of this stuff. And then you get all of these other much lesser bands that follow in the wake, you know. And you look back on it, especially in the light of seeing Sean on his reality programs and everything, you know. And it's funny, isn't it? You sort of compartmentalise these things, and it's quite easy to do that. And, you know, Britpop's Oasis versus Blur, isn't it? You know, and it's easy to ridicule it. But, you know, at the start of that thing, certainly, you know, that trip I did to Paris with the Roses, it was genuinely exciting. And the thing, you know, it was really, you felt like you were at the start of something, you know, pretty great.
Yeah, but I think it's the same thing as grunge, right? You had Nirvana, who were a great band, and then a whole swathe of utter shit that came along that got signed, you know, your Soundgardens and your Pearl Jams and your Alice in Chains and all that fucking rubbish. Like just really blokey pedestrian shite that got signed because everybody wanted to sign a Nirvana. And I think Madchester is the same. There is not, in any other period of time, there is not a chance in hell that Northside or The Farm would have got a record contract.
I was about to say The Farm. It's just ambulance chasing, isn't it?
Utter drivel, right? And that whole movement, I mean, everything was wrong with that movement. You don't wear baggy trousers. It's not rock and roll, right? You don't have stupid fucking curtain haircuts. It's not rock and roll. You know, like they're just everything about Madchester and indie dance. You know, at that point, there was excellent dance music being made all across the UK, right? Aphex Twin is already out. LFO are out. A guy called Gerald is out. Orbiter are already out. Like amazing dance music. What's the point in putting a bunch of jangly twats over the top of it? Why don't you just listen to dance music? Sorry, bit cross about that.
Do you remember the Cockney Happy Mondays? The only band.
Yeah, Flowered Up.
Weekender.
Weekender.
Barry Moonbeam, was it Barry Moonbeam?
Yeah, with his stupid fucking flower head. Actually, Weekender is a brilliant song, but
it is. But that's the only one they did.
Ross, did you do any Madchester, Ross, at all?
No, so I came on it a bit late, really. I mean, I think, you know, I think the Stone Roses' first LP is just, you know, absolute, you know, stone cold work of absolute genius.
Ross, did you like the second Stone Roses LP?
Second Coming?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got time for it, actually. I must admit, I play the first one. I can't remember the last time I put on the Second Coming, but I don't remember being particularly upset about it. I thought it had value. I mean, you know, I listened to John Squire all day, really, and I think, you know, when you got drums and guitar going on like they could play, I think there's always something there. Ian Brown, I can take or leave, but I think the other three I thought were fantastic. As I say, I became a big Charlatans fan. I still go and see the Charlatans whenever they're in town. Although I know they're slightly later than the sort of period we're talking about.
He's another one, isn't he? Can't sing. Tim Burgess.
Yeah,
literally can't sing. Very strange. Like Ian Brown can't hold a note. It's very strange how these like Sarah Cracknell from Saint Etienne. There's a thing about a 90s indie singer. They was kind of almost sorry. Something
in the water in Manchester. Nobody from Manchester can sing.
Morrissey
can't sing either.
Barney from New Order.
He can't sing. Perhaps it's against the law to sing.
It's the aesthetic, though, isn't it? And once they've started it off, it becomes a characteristic of the sound, and so it's just talking with a little bit of tonal variation, and that seems to be de rigueur. So everyone's it's kind of works.
Yeah.
I think we can segue onto summings up and scores. So let's start with you, Steve. Seeing as it was your suggestion, can you give us a bit of summing? Unless you've got anything, I don't mean to kind of cut anyone off. If you've got anything left to say, then please say it. But otherwise, can you finish the number?
I really enjoyed going back to this. Actually, I really did, because I dismissed it at the time, and to me, there's one nav track on it, Cut 'Em Loose, Bruce. It doesn't work on any level. I'd say, what do you give it again? It's out of 100, is it?
100, Steve. For Christ's sake, it's easy to remember, mate.
I give this one 85.
I love Cut 'Em Loose, Bruce. I really like it.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So
Hold on, is that the highest score we've ever had from anybody on this show?
No, I think I gave Metal Machine Music
100.
million out of 10.
Did you? Wow.
Yeah.
For you.
85, Marcus.
Well, this has been a revelation for me, to go from utter negativity to something which was completely joyous. That's the best turnaround you can wish for, really. So, who was it who picked this album, by the way? Steve, thank you so much. This has been great. It's been a total pleasure.
Good.
I'm going to go pretty high on this. I think I'm going to go for 77.
77. Christ, this is a rout. Well, till we get to you, Marcus. I mean, Ross. Who's next? Sorry, Simon. So I'm trying to find my calculator on my phone. My calculator's changed. Carry on, Simon.
Well, I think it was Ross next, but it doesn't matter. I'll go. I'm going to give it. Sorry, I'm still calculating because this is a finely tuned algorithm. Hang on. It's 78. No, it's not. It's 83. Sorry, I miscalculated on the last.
Final answer. You got third time lucky.
83.
It's 83.
83.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're scoring each track and sort of adding them all up.
I can't reveal how my algorithm works in case you copy it, Marcus. But I'd like to say, Steve, thank you very much. This has been the most enjoyable pod research I've.
For me too.
We've had some awful misery on this program, haven't we?
Yeah, and
Yes.
with that,
We've dragged ourselves through, thinking,
And we will again.
And mainly your choice.
Come back.
Ross, bring it down, mate. Bring it down.
Yeah, sorry.
Stop all this happiness.
I was really bored with this, and to the extent that I think for the first time on this pod, it was with a heavy heart that I put it on, and I did listen to it a good 5 or 6 times. I started listening to it when I was running, and I just couldn't wait for the whole thing to be done. So not for me, thanks, but 20.
20. Okay, thank you. I'm not going quite so high as some of the others, but I liked it so much more than I thought I was going to, and listened to it more than probably anything else we've listened to, and it sent me back. I've listened to all the other albums loads, and I've just really enjoyed it. And I think that'll do for me now. Although I think this intense Happy Mondays deep dive I've done, that'll probably do, and that's fine. But I'm giving it 65. All together, so we've got 85, Steve 85, Marcus 77, Simon 83, Ross 20, me 65. That gives us a total of 330. Divided by, oh god, my
66, I think.
Divided by 5 is 66. Did someone just say 66?
Yeah, that was me.
You're doing that in your head?
Yeah. I've been drinking tonight as well. Something's clicking.
Did you actually honestly do that in your head, Marcus? Did you?
I did actually. Yeah, genuinely did.
That puts it in second place of all time. That's number 2 on the all-time leaderboard, behind Humble Pie. Sorry,
what was better?
Humble Pie Thunderbox.
Mm.
That was Steve. That was the first one we ever did. That was Steve Webster when he didn't really understand the rules. He chose a cool album from the past that he really liked, that he thought we'd all like, and we did.
Make a note of that.
Yeah. So Thunderbox number 1 with 72.5. This in at number 2 with 66, which pushes Drama by Yes down into third place for 61. So it goes Humble Pie, Happy Mondays, Yes. There we go. That was very interesting, wasn't it? Right, Ross.
Yes.
It's your turn to choose next week, mate.
It is.
Drum roll.
I've been umming and ahhing about this one just because it's quite a well-known album. There's a couple of pretty well-known tracks on it, but I think it fits the criteria. So it's a 1967 LP, and it's not Sgt. Pepper. And it came out, it sold well, but got not universally, but the vast majority got a critical cold shoulder. And I think particularly why I thought it would be suitable for this is in that there's almost 60 years since it's happened. In some areas, it's had a bit of a critical renaissance and seen it as an underappreciated gem. In other quarters, it's still seen as just a misstep in the band's career and one to forget. So I figure that for the fact 60 years it's been dividing opinion, that turns it into questionable, which is in our remit. So it's the Rolling Stones, and it's their Satanic Majesty's Request.
Oh, good call, Ross. Very good call. That fits perfectly into our remit. Lovely, lovely, lovely. I only know one song off that, which was 2000 Man, which Kiss covered on Dynasty. Don't you know I'm a 2000
Spare us, Seb. Enough.
No. So hey, yeah, that was their attempt at the Stones' attempt at psychedelia, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Very good. Does anyone know that? Anyone know? I know vaguely, but no. Okay.
And can I just say to Simon a big thank you for the little playlist he sent me of during the week of Sisters of Mercy stuff, because we listened to that album last week, which was the kind of what was it, sort of soft rock Jim Steinman thing. We gave a right stating. The early stuff I could see its charm. I could see it. I kind of got it. It's not going to be.
Sorry, can I just ask a question on behalf of the group? Simon, did you secretly send Marcus the Sisters of Mercy playlist?
No,
Marcus asked me for one, and I replied.
How come you didn't share it with that? You secretly sent it. You could have said.
No, he secretly messaged me. If we're getting into who was secret, but I on the basis that Marcus and I have shared some real quality time over Zoom in the last few weeks, I think we're entitled to message each other if we want to.
No, it's lovely.
Consenting adults. I mean, what it's put your nose out of joint, Seb, isn't it?
No, you're just being a little bit defensive about it, aren't you? It's like, I'm just saying, like, share your fucking Sisters of Mercy private little sex chat with everyone.
All right, I'll send the link to the.
No. I reserve the right to take the piss and then stop.
We've got a little logo. We've got the Sisters logo on our little group chat now. It's really quite. Don't you read part of it, Seb?
Oh no, maybe. Yeah, go on then. Yeah, go on.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
We thought you didn't like goth. Oh, by the way, the one goth band that we discussed tonight is the only one that you didn't call goth. Stone Roses were a goth band initially.
Well, originally, yeah, but
didn't know that.
Listen to some of their early stuff. They were very much a goth band.
They were a goth band. They look at the pictures; it's quite embarrassing.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Was that when they were at school or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, primary school.
Yeah.
People grow up fast in Manchester.
So, Seb.
Yes, mate.
Your Yeti T-shirt. Where'd you get that?
Oh yeah, well spotted. The internet.
That's lovely.
Yeah. Love a bit of Yeti.
Me too.
Right, that's it. Thanks everybody. Thank you, Ross. Ross, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Marcus. Thank you. Simon, thank you.
Thank you,
Steve. Thank you. Thanks, thanks everyone. And if you're listening to, if you got this far through, please like and subscribe, all that sort of stuff.